June 18, 2016 seemed like any other summer day in the quiet town. But by the time the sun had set, panic gripped the entire community. 33 residents, ranging from small children to the town's oldest citizen, had disappeared without a single sign or warning. Their houses stood eerily untouched, half-eaten breakfasts on kitchen tables, laundry left spinning in machines, and televisions still humming softly in abandoned living rooms. Cars remained parked neatly in driveways, pets waited by the door, and not a single phone call or message revealed a clue. As families frantically searched for answers and police cordoned off entire neighborhoods, rumors spread like wildfire.
Did you hear what happened?
The town's sense of safety shattered, replaced by a deep, paralyzing fear. The deeper investigators looked, the more they realized the disappearances were not random, and that something far stranger lurked beneath Maplewood's peaceful surface. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any sound. The morning of June 18th in Maplewood began with the usual routines that marked the start of every day in this peaceful community. Sunlight filtered gently through the tall maple trees that lined Willow Avenue, casting dappled patterns on freshly mown lawns. Children rushed out, backpacks swinging, as parents exchanged tired greetings and sips of coffee before their commutes. The local bakery opened at 6 sharp, sending the smell of warm bread drifting down Main Street. The town's bus rumbled by, collecting students and retirees heading to their morning destinations. There was nothing out of the ordinary, nothing to hint at the bizarre events about to unfold. For most, it was just another day until it wasn't. As the town slowly came to life, a strange stillness settled over Maplewood, barely noticeable at first. The mail carrier, Mrs. Elsie Turner, found herself pausing at each house, peering at curtains that never twitched and driveways that seemed oddly full for a weekday. At number 14, Willow Avenue, the front door was ajar, a bowl of cereal left untouched on the dining table. At number 22, the newspaper lay on the front porch, damp with dew, unclaimed past its usual hour. Little signs began to accumulate, cars not moved, dogs left outside longer than usual, the smell of burnt toast drifting from an open window with no one to claim it. By mid-morning, concerned neighbors started knocking on doors, their usual friendly calls turning to anxious shouts when no one answered. In the Jacobs house, a pot of coffee was still hot on the counter, a chair knocked over in the kitchen, and the family's golden retriever barking desperately at the back door. Across the street, Mrs. Patel's garden hose ran unchecked, flooding her prized tulip beds. Within a couple of hours, it became painfully clear to the residents that something was terribly wrong. The usual noises of town life, laughter, engines, distant radios were replaced by an uneasy quiet, broken only by the urgent whispers of frightened neighbors. Police arrived just before noon, summoned by a series of frantic calls that escalated as more empty homes were discovered. Officer Richard Hayes, a Maplewood native, had never seen the town in such disarray. He methodically checked house after house, finding the same eerie signs: unfinished breakfasts, open books left face down, toys scattered mid-play, and no sign of their owners. The initial theory was a mass evacuation, maybe a gas leak or a prank, but every test returned normal. No one had seen or heard anything unusual the night before, and the town's security cameras offered nothing but static. As afternoon stretched on, panic spread. The police chief declared a state of emergency. Families clustered together, clutching each other for comfort. News vans began to arrive, capturing the confusion and terror that had overtaken Maplewood. By sundown, it was official: 33 people were missing, and not a single trace explained where they had gone. As night settled over Maplewood, the search for the missing 33 intensified, and the sense of urgency sharpened with every passing hour. Flashlights cut through the darkness as teams of police, firefighters, and volunteers fanned out, combing through backyards, basements, and the nearby woods. Even the normally bustling Maplewood diner shut its doors early, its regulars joining the search parties, fueled by coffee and mounting dread. The local radio station broadcast hourly updates, urging everyone to report any detail, no matter how trivial. Parents kept their children close, double-checking locks and calling loved ones over and over, desperate for news. In living rooms, televisions played the same looping footage: abandoned homes, hastily dropped belongings, and the stunned faces of neighbors who could not comprehend the sudden emptiness stopped by midnight. Command tents dotted the town square, and search dogs sniffed every corner, their handlers' voices low and tense. The state police had arrived, setting up a mobile headquarters, mapping out every lead, and interviewing anyone who might have seen something out of the ordinary. Rumors began to circulate. Was it a mass abduction, a bizarre cult, or something even stranger? Everyone had a theory, but the facts stubbornly refused to fit any narrative. Each missing person had vanished in the middle of their daily routines, some in pajamas, others dressed for work or school. Not a single witness had come forward. Phones belonging to the missing still rang unanswered, their signals unmoving from inside the empty houses. It was as if the people had simply ceased to exist in the midst of the chaos. A few sharp-eyed townsfolk began to notice odd details that did not add up. At the Miller house, the family's 2-year-old daughter had vanished, but her favorite stuffed rabbit was left propped upright on her pillow, as if carefully arranged. At the grocery store, Mrs. Kemp's shopping cart sat abandoned in aisle 3, a half-written grocery list tucked under a carton of eggs. In the town library, the computer screen at the front desk blinked with a half-finished email, never sent. These details, strange but deeply personal, painted a picture that chilled investigators to the bone. The disappearances were sudden, yes, but also eerily quiet, as if someone or something had slipped into Maplewood and taken only the people, leaving their lives frozen behind them by dawn. Fatigue and fear hung over the town like a fog. People who had never locked their doors before now checked them twice. The once friendly atmosphere of Maplewood shifted into suspicion. Every unfamiliar car or sound drawing worried glances. In a single day, the community's sense of safety had been shattered, and trust between neighbors frayed. The search continued, but so did the questions. Growing darker and more complicated with each hour, the missing remained unfound. No one could sleep. No one could rest. And in that long, haunted night, Maplewood learned just how quickly the world can change, and how helpless it feels to watch it happen. With the arrival of the second day, Maplewood found itself under the glare of national media attention. News vans lined Main Street, satellite dishes and camera crews turning the once quiet town center into a circus of flashing lights and frantic reporters. Helicopters hovered overhead, their blades slicing the morning air as they relayed live feeds to audiences far beyond the county's borders. Interviews with trembling family members played on every channel, each one telling a similar story. The missing had left behind everything but a single clue: a stopped clock, a still warm cup of tea, a door swinging open in the morning breeze. Every detail was pored over and replayed, but none brought the town closer to understanding what had happened. The police, now working with federal agents, redoubled their efforts to uncover any link between the missing. They traced their routines, mapped out relationships, and scrutinized digital footprints, but the investigation stalled at every turn. There were no ransom demands, no signs of forced entry, and no evidence anyone had left of their own free will. The roads in and out of Maplewood were monitored, but no suspicious vehicles had been recorded. Friends and families gathered in anxious clusters at the community center, some holding on to hope, others beginning to confront the possibility that Maplewood might never be the same. The town's mayor, exhausted and gaunt, addressed the public daily, promising answers but delivering only more questions. Meanwhile, a new unease took hold. Residents who remained began to experience strange phenomena. Lights flickered in empty homes. Pets whined at doorways, and some claimed to hear faint voices echoing from abandoned houses at night. Theories multiplied, growing wilder as fear took root. Some believed it was the work of a secret society. Others whispered about government experiments, while a few recalled old legends of the land on which Maplewood had been built. No one dared walk alone after sunset. Parents forbade their children from venturing outside, and the local schools suspended all classes until further notice. Where laughter once rang down Maplewood's tree-lined streets, only nervous silence remained. On the evening of the third day, a candlelight vigil drew the community together, hundreds of trembling flames lighting up the town square. Old rivalries and grudges were set aside as people joined hands, praying for the safe return of the missing 33. For a few quiet moments, hope flickered brighter than the fear. Yet, as the vigil ended and darkness crept in, many glanced over their shoulders, wondering if Maplewood would ever feel safe again. That night, a storm rolled over the town, rattling windows and sending chills through those left behind. With every thunderclap, the same chilling question lingered in the hearts of all. What force could take 33 people in an instant, leaving behind only silence? The storm's aftermath left Maplewood soaked and battered, its streets littered with broken branches and scattered debris. Power outages added to the town's unease, plunging several neighborhoods into darkness for hours. Emergency crews rushed to clear fallen trees and restore electricity, their headlights and lanterns glowing through the drizzle. But as the day wore on, a new detail emerged that deepened the sense of mystery. Several search teams, working along the creek that bordered Maplewood's southern edge, found a series of footprints leading down the muddy bank. Oddly, these prints belonged to at least a dozen different shoe sizes, some matching those of the missing residents, others seemingly too small or too large. The tracks ended abruptly at the water's edge, with no evidence anyone had entered or left the creek. Investigators marked the spot and brought in tracking dogs, but the trail faded as quickly as it had appeared. Word of the footprints spread quickly through the town, fueling both hope and anxiety. Some residents clung to the idea that the missing might still be nearby, perhaps hiding or trapped somewhere along the waterway. Others feared that the discovery signaled something more sinister, a sign the disappearances were only just beginning. As rumors grew, the creek became a focal point for both official search efforts and unofficial theories. People gathered on its banks, whispering about old stories of the land, tales that spoke of vanishings and strange happenings near the water long before Maplewood was founded. The atmosphere was thick with dread, but also with the stubborn determination of a town desperate for answers. Inside the hastily established command center, maps of the area were covered with pins, string, and scribbled notes, each marking possible leads. The footprints by the creek dominated every discussion. Search teams were dispatched in shifts, wading through the underbrush and dragging the water for clues. Despite their efforts, no new evidence turned up, no discarded clothing, no personal items, and not a single sign of struggle. Investigators grew frustrated, their theories running in circles. Some argued for a natural explanation. Others insisted it must be something calculated and organized, but the facts stubbornly refused to cooperate. The case files grew thicker, but the answers remained out of reach. As evening approached, Maplewood's residents returned to their homes, windows shuttered against the coming night. Yet no one slept easily. Parents kept their children close, listening for any unusual sounds. Elderly neighbors checked on each other, exchanging stories and theories late into the night. The town's nerves were stretched thin, everyone waiting for news that might never come. In the quiet that settled over Maplewood, the missing 33 seemed both impossibly distant and hauntingly close, their absence pressing in from every corner. That night, as thunder rumbled once more in the distance, Maplewood braced itself for whatever the next day might bring. The fifth day dawned grey and unsettled, as if the weather itself had absorbed Maplewood's anxiety. News coverage intensified, with more reporters crowding the town's limited streets, their cameras seeking reactions from anyone who might have insight into the growing mystery. Some townspeople, overwhelmed by the relentless attention, began to resent the media presence. Tensions flared between residents and outsiders, suspicion running high. Still, others welcomed the attention, hoping that national exposure might shake loose some hidden clue or bring in experts who could make sense of the chaos. Town officials urged patience, but the pressure was mounting on every front. Among the searchers, fatigue began to show. Volunteers who had not slept for days now moved slowly, their optimism replaced with grim determination. The police and state investigators continued to chase every lead: phone records, bank statements, surveillance footage, but every avenue seemed to end in the same frustrating dead ends. The footprints by the creek remained the only physical trace, and even those told an incomplete story. The theory that the missing had left voluntarily grew less convincing with each passing hour, especially as investigators interviewed friends and family members who described the 33 as happy, content, and deeply rooted in Maplewood life. Inside the community center, where worried relatives gathered daily, the mood was a mix of hope and helplessness. People prayed, made posters, and shared stories about the missing, trying to keep their spirits alive. The walls were lined with photographs, birthday cards, and drawings from children, reminders of lives that had simply paused mid-sentence. Local businesses donated food and blankets, and a sense of unity formed in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. At night, a soft vigil of candles and lanterns lit up the square, each flicker a quiet promise not to give up. These simple rituals, repeated night after night, became the heartbeat of a town waiting for a miracle. Yet beneath the surface, unease deepened. Police officers patrolling Maplewood's outskirts began to notice odd behavior in the natural world: birds gathering in unusual numbers on power lines, neighborhood dogs barking at empty spaces, and a sudden increase in coyote sightings along the town's borders. A few old-timers quietly muttered about patterns, remembering tales of strange happenings from generations past. Though officials brushed off the stories as stress-fueled superstition, Some townsfolk wondered if Maplewood's missing were not just a tragedy but a warning, a puzzle demanding to be solved. As darkness fell, everyone felt it, a sense that whatever had taken the 33 was not finished with Maplewood yet. The sixth day brought a sense of restless energy to Maplewood, as if the entire town teetered on the edge of some unseen revelation. The search expanded outward, with authorities deploying drones and search teams far beyond the original perimeter. Maps now stretched to neighboring towns, forests, and old farmsteads, each new area combed as thoroughly as possible. The state police coordinated with local law enforcement, bringing in experts on missing persons cases. They pored over every piece of evidence, every detail, hoping for a breakthrough. But the core mystery held stubborn. 33 people had simply vanished, leaving behind perfectly ordinary lives and not a single solid lead throughout the day. Small discoveries sent waves of hope through the search parties. A child's shoe was found near an abandoned railroad track, but it belonged to a family that had not reported anyone missing. An old blanket was uncovered in a field, but it was sun-bleached and weathered, likely left behind months earlier. The investigators collected each item, tagged it, and filed it away, unwilling to dismiss anything. Still, these were only distractions, false starts in a town running low on answers. Some searchers began to question whether the missing 33 was still even in Maplewood, or if something far stranger had taken place. Within the town itself, old divisions resurfaced as stress mounted. Some residents clung tightly to their routines, trying to force normalcy back into their lives, mowing lawns, sweeping porches, opening shops for a handful of customers. Others could not sleep, spending hours online searching for similar cases or piecing together their own theories. Social media buzzed with speculation, some of it wild, some grounded in reason, but all of it fueled by fear and frustration. There were arguments at the market and tense whispers at the gas station, as neighbors debated everything from supernatural explanations to government cover-ups. The uncertainty was exhausting, and it took a toll on everyone. That evening, an unexpected event unsettled the town even further. At sunset, the church bells rang out without warning, echoing through Maplewood's empty streets. No one had seen anyone enter the church, and the doors were still locked when police arrived minutes later. The sound chilled residents to the bone, its lonely toll a reminder that even the familiar could turn strange. Children huddled close to their parents, and the older generation remembered stories of omens and warnings. As the last bell faded, a collective shiver ran through Maplewood. The missing 33 lingered in every conversation, their absence now woven into the fabric of daily life. The question haunted everyone: what, if anything, would tomorrow bring? Day 7 began with an unusual calm, the kind that unsettles more than it soothes. The air was thick with humidity, and a faint mist clung to the ground, blurring the familiar outlines of houses and trees. For the first time since the disappearances, search parties started the day quietly, sharing fewer words as they prepared to comb the woods and riverbanks once again. The initial surge of adrenaline had faded, replaced by grim persistence. The volunteers gathered at dawn, their faces drawn and sleepless, driven by a stubborn refusal to accept that 33 people could simply vanish without leaving a mark. As the sun climbed, Maplewood streets filled with the noise of strangers. Experts from outside, including forensic psychologists and search and rescue specialists, arrived to offer fresh perspectives. They brought new equipment and new questions, interviewing relatives and analyzing the most minute details, the timing of power outages, strange weather patterns, even fluctuations in the town's internet traffic. Some townspeople bristled at the intrusion, but others welcomed the help, grateful for anything that might break the deadlock. The investigators worked methodically, convinced that every disappearance leaves a trace, even if it takes time to find. Still, as the hours slipped by, no fresh evidence surfaced, and hope grew thinner with each tick of the clock. That afternoon, a strange pattern caught the attention of an analyst reviewing cell phone records. All 33 missing people's phones had connected to the same cell tower within a 7-minute window, sometime just before sunrise on the day they vanished. The timing was too precise to be a coincidence, and the discovery sent a ripple of excitement through the investigation teams. Technicians pored over data, tracing the digital breadcrumbs left behind, hoping for a clue. But the signals did not move. They all dropped offline from their respective homes, as if 33 people had been interrupted simultaneously and their phones had simply powered off. The incident was perplexing and chilling. What could have caused such coordinated silence, especially when no one in the rest of Maplewood had noticed anything out of the ordinary? As dusk settled, a heavy, uneasy silence filled the town. The cell tower discovery provided a small measure of hope, but also deepened the sense of unease. For every answer, new questions emerged. Maplewood's residents gathered for another vigil, the circle of candles growing smaller as exhaustion and fear took their toll. People prayed, hugged, and shared whispered promises not to give up. Yet beneath the show of unity, doubt gnawed at the edges of their hope. That night, the wind carried faint echoes of the church bells from the evening before, their haunting sound lingering long after midnight. 33 people were gone, and for the 7th night in a row, no one could explain how or why. On the 8th day, an uneasy tension settled over Maplewood, as if the town itself was holding its breath. The routine of search parties and press conferences felt mechanical now, repeated so many times that they lost meaning. Townsfolk woke up early and walked through empty rooms, each day hoping for a sign that something, anything, had changed. Even the children, kept indoors for safety, spoke in hushed voices, their games turning somber as they mimicked searchers with makeshift flashlights. The loss was beginning to shape the town's very identity. Streets that once echoed with laughter now felt foreign, as if Maplewood was being erased one memory at a time. As the investigation dragged on, attention shifted to the town's deeper history. A small group of residents, led by retired schoolteacher Clara Walton, began sifting through old records and diaries in the town library. They pored over decades of archives, searching for any pattern or mention of past vanishings. Clara discovered an odd entry from 1926, describing a night when several townspeople heard voices in the fog and found household objects inexplicably moved the next morning, though there had been no mass disappearance. The story was eerily similar to details found in some of the missing residents' homes. The parallel gave rise to theories that Maplewood had always been touched by mystery, that the town's troubles were not new but recurring. Meanwhile, police shifted tactics, canvassing areas outside Maplewood and setting up checkpoints along all major roads. They worked closely with neighboring jurisdictions, following up on every reported sighting of strangers, odd vehicles, or unfamiliar faces. Still, no evidence surfaced. The surrounding communities grew nervous, with some families choosing to leave town for a while. Maplewood's isolation, once its greatest charm, now felt like a trap. Even the most skeptical townsfolk grew quiet, unable to dismiss the nagging sense that what was happening here was beyond ordinary explanation. That evening, Local radio host Emily Reed broke her usual routine and opened the phone lines for a town-wide call-in. Voices trembled as people shared their theories, fears, and fragments of hope. Some called for unity, others spoke of old legends, and a few even confessed to seeing strange lights in the woods on the night before the disappearances. Emily, her voice steady but strained, ended the program with a simple message: "Maplewood, we're in this together, and we won't stop searching." Her words lingered as lights went out across the town, candles still flickering in dozens of windows, a small, stubborn defiance against the darkness that refused to lift by the 9th day. A somber routine had settled over Maplewood, but the uncertainty felt heavier with each sunrise. The absence of the 33 missing residents left behind more than empty rooms and unfinished conversations. It carved a hollow space in the fabric of daily life. Family members kept returning to the houses of the vanished, straightening pictures, picking up mail, and watering plants as if maintaining order would somehow reverse the loss. School teachers drafted lesson plans they never used, while shop owners left open signs in windows, waiting for customers who never arrived. The ritual of pretending life could go on was exhausting, but the alternative, accepting the inexplicable, was far worse. Investigators pressed on with little rest, driven as much by their own frustration as by the hopes of the town. Federal experts in digital forensics arrived, drawn by the strange cell tower data, and set up a mobile lab at the edge of the town square. They analyzed every text, call, and internet search made by the missing in the days before their disappearance. The results puzzled even the most seasoned analysts. Nothing out of the ordinary, no hidden messages or codes, no sign that anyone anticipated what was to come. Meanwhile, local officers retraced their steps along the creek, through the woods, and around every vacant building, desperate for a missed clue. But every path circled back to the same chilling conclusion: the missing had not simply left. They had been removed from the world in a way no one could understand. That afternoon, a discovery in the attic of the Parker family home brought a flicker of hope and confusion. The Parker family had disappeared like the others, but their attic revealed a weathered cardboard box filled with decades-old letters and newspaper clippings. Inside was a series of articles about unexplained disappearances from other small towns, all within a 100-mile radius of Maplewood, dating back nearly a century. There were cryptic notes in the margins, phrases like patterns in the fog, no goodbyes, and always in June. The findings sent a shiver through the investigation team. It seemed someone in the Parker family had been researching similar mysteries for years. Now, the box of clippings was passed around the command center like a talisman, fueling speculation that Maplewood was not alone in its suffering. The news spread quickly, and soon the town buzzed with rumors of curses and cycles, of past disappearances that had never been explained. Historians and journalists flocked to the library and archives, trying to verify the connections hinted at in the Parker family's collection. Some residents clung to rational explanations, while others whispered of supernatural forces, strange weather, and ancient secrets buried under the town. The fear of what might come next was palpable. As darkness settled over Maplewood once again, the sense of being watched grew stronger, every shadow and distant sound amplified by dread. With every passing night, the line between the known and the unknown seemed to blur, and the mystery of the missing 33 grew only deeper. Morning brought a fresh wave of visitors to Maplewood, journalists, researchers, and curious outsiders drawn by headlines that now described the town as the epicenter of America's strangest mystery. The sudden influx complicated the already tense atmosphere. While some families welcomed the attention, hoping it would bring answers, others bristled at the invasion of privacy. Crowds gathered at the edge of police tape, snapping photos of houses with drawn curtains and empty driveways. News drones buzzed overhead, broadcasting images of anxious faces and flickering candlelit vigils to a country transfixed by the unfolding drama. In town meetings, leaders struggled to balance openness with the need to protect families still hoping for a miracle inside the command center. Investigators shifted their focus to the Parker family's attic findings. The articles and clippings charted a disturbing pattern: clusters of disappearances from other towns, always in early summer, always involving groups rather than individuals. Some events mirrored Maplewood's case closely, while others hinted at different methods but shared the same vanishing without a trace signature. Analysts marked every known incident on a sprawling map, tracing invisible lines between towns and years, but no clear logic emerged. A few experts floated the possibility of a hidden community or underground movement, but the absence of any physical evidence or eyewitness reports made these theories as hollow as the silence left behind. Meanwhile, historian Clara Walton dug deeper into local lore, interviewing elderly residents and poring over diaries and parish records. She unearthed stories of recurring fog banks, mysterious lights, and unexplainable chills that swept the town every few decades. An entry in the 1949 church ledger described an entire wedding party falling ill during a dense morning. No one disappeared, but many reported vivid, frightening dreams for years after. These tales, dismissed as folklore for generations, now took on new urgency. Clara wondered aloud at a meeting whether Maplewood's land held a memory, repeating its secrets every few decades, indifferent to the passing of time, on the edge of town. A new worry surfaced when a group of teenagers exploring the woods discovered an old, weather-beaten sign. The lettering was barely legible. "Welcome to Millbridge Est, 1907. No one in Maplewood remembered a town called Millbridge, and old maps failed to show it. The teens also reported finding broken stone foundations and overgrown paths leading nowhere. The possibility that another vanished settlement lay just beyond Maplewood's borders sent chills through the community. What else had been forgotten, and what connection did it have to the fate of the 33? As the sun set, townsfolk wondered if their search for answers had just begun, or if the real story was even bigger and more frightening than they could imagine. The 11th day saw a subtle shift in Maplewood's mood, from frantic hope to wary endurance. People began talking less about when the missing would return and more about how to carry on if they did not. The shops on Main Street, once bustling even during the height of the search, now opened for only a few hours a day, if at all. Some owners sat at empty counters, staring out at streets that seemed to have lost their rhythm. The local school board, after much debate, decided to postpone the start of summer classes indefinitely, citing the emotional toll on students and staff. Life in Maplewood moved in slow motion, each day blurring into the next. Investigators continued to work the Millbridge angle, sending historians, surveyors, and police into the woods to examine the stone foundations and overgrown paths discovered by the teenagers. The searchers found remnants of what appeared to be an abandoned settlement, bits of pottery, rusted tools, and fragments of handwritten letters. But the evidence only deepened the puzzle. There were no official records of Millbridge, no deeds or legal notices, just scattered rumors in a few faded journals. Some speculated that Millbridge had suffered a similar fate to Maplewood, vanishing from history with little warning. Was there a pattern, or only coincidence? The team marked every discovery, hoping the next one would connect the dots. Meanwhile, townspeople took solace in small acts of community. Every evening, Clara Walton and a group of volunteers organized shared meals at the community center. People brought casseroles, bread, or fruit, and sat in circles trading stories, some hopeful, some heartbreaking, but all an effort to remember the missing as real people, not just names on a list. These moments helped keep despair at bay, at least for a few hours. Children played quietly under the watchful eyes of parents, their laughter tentative but genuine. The meals became a ritual, a thread of normalcy woven into the days of uncertainty. On the investigative front, digital forensics experts noticed a strange coincidence. Several of the missing residents had purchased batteries and flashlights in the week before they vanished, all at the same local hardware store. The purchases had seemed innocuous, but the analysts could not ignore the pattern. Had someone warned them? Were they preparing for something unknown? The lead brought a flurry of new interviews and surveillance reviews, but as with so many clues, it faded into ambiguity. As midnight approached, Maplewood's quiet deepened. The lights from the community center glowed softly in the darkness, a beacon of hope in a landscape that felt more mysterious with every passing day. Day 12 began with heavy skies, and the distant sound of thunder. Rain swept over Maplewood in fitful bursts, soaking lawns and washing away the footprints left by searchers and journalists alike. The weather added another layer of gloom to a town already battered by worry and uncertainty. Despite the downpour, the investigation continued relentlessly. Teams moved from house to house, reviewing every timeline and searching for the smallest irregularity. They revisited the homes of the missing, carefully cataloguing everything from receipts to family calendars, hoping to uncover something previously overlooked. It was slow, tedious work, but no one was ready to give up. Meanwhile, the story of Millbridge took on a life of its own. Amateur sleuths and paranormal enthusiasts flocked to Maplewood, convinced that the answers to both towns' mysteries were hidden in the tangled woods between them. Some claimed to feel a strange presence in the ruins, an unnatural cold that lingered even on warm days. Investigators tried to keep control, posting signs to keep people away from dangerous sites, but curiosity won out. By noon, rumors were spreading about symbols carved into the stones and odd noises echoing at night. Police collected reports but found little evidence, just more questions and a deepening sense of unease. In the community center, the daily meal continued, but the conversations took a darker turn. People spoke quietly about the possibility of never finding the missing, about what it would mean for the town's future. Grief counselors visited, urging residents to talk about their fears rather than hide them. Old rivalries faded as the shared sense of loss drew everyone together. Even as some clung to hope, others began to prepare for a future shadowed by absence. It was a painful reckoning, but it helped many to realize they were not alone in their worry. As the day ended, a new detail surfaced that added fuel to the ongoing theories. A postal worker, sorting through old mail, discovered a stack of postcards that had been scheduled for delivery the day after the disappearances. Each card was addressed to someone who was still in Maplewood, and each one was written by one of the missing. The messages were ordinary birthday wishes, thank yous, quick notes to friends, but the sight of the familiar handwriting hit the town hard. It was proof that, just hours before they vanished, The missing had been thinking of those they left behind. As the rain continued to fall, Maplewood was reminded again of the simple, ordinary moments that now seemed so precious and so far out of reach. Sunrise on the 13th day found Maplewood cloaked in thick fog, muffling the sounds of the waking town. The mist seemed almost unnatural, curling low across the roads and fields, swallowing up houses until only their outlines remained. Some residents refused to leave their homes, unnerved by the memory of strange fogs described in old stories and the recent diaries found in the Parker attic. Others braved the haze, determined to continue their daily routines as a form of quiet defiance. For many, the fog felt like a living reminder that Maplewood's mystery was nowhere near solved, that something unknown lingered just beyond the edge of sight. Investigators took the weather as an omen, doubling down on their efforts. Working in pairs, they combed through the ruins of Millbridge, guided by handheld GPS units and old maps. Near the foundation of what may have been a schoolhouse, they unearthed a time-worn metal box. Inside, they found brittle photographs, faded letters, and a notebook filled with careful handwriting. The entries described strange events, sudden silences, flickering lights, and entire days that some villagers could not recall. The notebook's last page ended abruptly, the handwriting jagged and desperate, noting, "If you find this, remember watch for the fog." The find deepened the sense that Maplewood's story was part of something much older and much larger than anyone had guessed. Meanwhile, the families of the missing gathered at the community center, where the meal ritual had taken on the feel of a daily vigil. They shared the postcards discovered the day before, tracing the words with trembling fingers and reading them aloud. Each message was a painful reminder of what had been lost. Everyday kindnesses, shared plans, and small acts of love. Grief, usually hidden behind closed doors, found expression in the company of others. People cried together, held hands, and spoke the names of the missing, determined that their loved ones would not fade away in silence. The postcards became a new kind of keepsake, fragile yet precious, evidence that life had continued right up until the moment it didn't. That night, as the fog finally began to lift, a power outage swept through Maplewood. Flashlights and candles flickered in windows, throwing long shadows across the deserted streets. The outage only lasted an hour, but it left a mark on everyone's nerves. Some insisted they heard voices in the darkness, faint and urgent, calling from empty homes. Others described a sense of being watched, as if something in the fog had lingered behind. As lights came back on, people drifted into restless sleep, troubled by dreams of vanished towns and warnings written in forgotten notebooks. With each passing day, the distance between Maplewood's ordinary life and its new reality grew wider, and the hope of finding the missing, though battered, remained alive. The 14th day dawned clear, the fog finally gone, but the sense of unease lingering. Maplewood's residents emerged into the sunlight, blinking as if stepping into a new world. For a brief moment, hope seemed possible, a fresh start, a day without another cruel twist. Investigators and volunteers took advantage of the clear weather, resuming searches along the riverbank and in the dense woods that separated Maplewood from the ruins of Millbridge. New technology arrived with a team of experts: ground-penetrating radar, thermal drones, and sensitive listening devices, all focused on finding what the eye could not see. The search grew ever more sophisticated, but the core mystery stubbornly remained. Amid the renewed search, Local, Historian Clara. Walton met with two experts in regional folklore who had come to Maplewood. After reading about the time-worn notebook from Millbridge, together they mapped out incidents in both towns and noted a disturbing overlap not only of time and geography, but of uncanny details, odd weather, collective dreams, missing time, and sudden disappearances. One expert recalled an almost identical case from 1954 in a Novanished village further north, where a group of residents disappeared during a clear, sunny morning, never to be seen again. Clara began to suspect that the truth about Maplewood's missing 33 was part of a cycle that spanned generations. In the homes of the missing, families clung to hope by keeping up daily rituals. Beds were made, pets cared for, mail sorted, and lights left on in the windows each night. The postcards, now displayed at the community center, became a site of pilgrimage for both locals and outsiders. Journalists photographed the handwritten notes, careful not to touch or disturb the precious reminders. Some believed the messages might hold a code or a clue. Others simply wept to see the familiar words. In a town where the line between fact and legend was now blurred, everyone searched for meaning in every detail. That evening, the town council called an emergency meeting, inviting all residents to the school auditorium. Hundreds gathered, voices hushed and anxious. Officials gave updates, investigators answered questions, and Clara Walton spoke of the patterns uncovered in Maplewood's history. The meeting ended with a silent vote should they invite more outside experts, even those specializing in the supernatural. The consensus was clear. Nothing was off the table anymore. As the meeting broke up, people lingered in the parking lot, watching the sky for signs of change. Under the cold, clear stars, Maplewood's mystery felt at once bigger and more personal than ever. With each new day, Maplewood's sense of reality grew more fragile, as if the normal world was slipping away. The arrival of paranormal investigators and psychic mediums, invited after the town council's vote, divided residents. Some saw it as a desperate but necessary step, while others bristled at the idea of bringing in outsiders with no credentials beyond intuition and reputation. Still, people attended the medium's sessions in droves, sitting in circles in borrowed church halls and empty classrooms, holding hands as the psychics spoke in soft, urgent tones. Some claimed to sense echoes of the missing faint traces of warmth, whispers in empty rooms, or flickers of energy that left their hair standing on end. Most sessions ended in tears, with little in the way of answers. Meanwhile, the professional investigators did not let up. The search crews working along the creek uncovered something new, a tangle of brightly colored ribbons, tied in knots around an old tree stump deep in the woods. Some of the ribbons matched those worn by missing children at a local festival weeks before the disappearances. Carefully, the ribbons were gathered and sent for forensic analysis, though no one expected a breakthrough. Their discovery stirred hope and anxiety in equal measure. Was it a message, a warning, or just an innocent remnant of happier times? The families of the missing visited the spot in small groups, leaving flowers and tokens, as if by honoring the site they might coax some truth out of the shadows at the community center. Emotions ran high as people debated the latest developments. There were arguments over whether the search should shift focus to the supernatural or remain grounded in facts and evidence. Even the most logical residents found themselves drawn into speculation about curses, ley lines, or time slips. Clara Walton, trying to bridge the gap between belief and skepticism, organized a panel where experts of all stripes, historical, scientific, and paranormal, could share theories and listen to the concerns of the townspeople. The gathering lasted hours, ending only when the power flickered and a thunderstorm sent everyone hurrying home, nerves frayed. That night, Maplewood seemed to hold its breath as rain lashed the windows and lightning illuminated the empty streets. Some said they saw strange figures moving through the storm, silhouettes that vanished when approached. Others reported vivid dreams of walking in a town that was both Maplewood and not, led by the missing 33. The dreams felt real, so real that people awoke, shaken and uncertain where the boundary between waking and sleep lay. The unease persisted long after the storm passed, leaving the entire town feeling both haunted and determined, united in the belief that the answers, however strange, were drawing closer. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind a town washed clean but no less troubled. Debris littered the streets and fallen branches blocked several roads, giving the town an even more abandoned feel. Search teams met early, their determination hardening into something like defiance. Now each member moved with quiet resolve, as if Maplewood itself demanded they push forward for the sake of those still missing. Volunteers focused their efforts on the creek and woods, returning to the spot where the ribbons were found. They combed the undergrowth for overlooked evidence, but the forest offered only silence and the steady drip of water from the trees. Some felt the woods were trying to keep secrets, swallowing up any trace of what had happened to the 30-3 in the center of town. Families and neighbors gathered to help clear debris and support each other. The daily shared meal at the community center continued, with new faces joining each evening, drawn by the comfort of familiar company and the small hope that someone, somewhere, might bring news. Children drew pictures of the missing and posted them along the walls. Every story, every sketch, was a reminder of what had been lost and what still mattered. The atmosphere was somber, but there was a strength beneath the sorrow, a sense that if they could not solve the mystery, they could at least hold each other together. The panel organized by Clara Walton continued for a second night, this time focusing on the history and geography of the region. Experts discussed old maps, the lost settlement of Millbridge, and strange geological features beneath Maplewood soil. Theories ranged from the plausible to the outlandish: pockets of underground gas, magnetic anomalies, even echoes of ancient rituals. The paranormal investigators offered their own observations, describing energy fluctuations and feelings of being watched near the ruins. The panel ended with more questions than answers, but it helped many in the town feel less alone in their bewilderment. Their confusion now shared and voiced in public. As night fell, a new rumor swept through Maplewood. Several residents reported seeing lights flickering in the ruins of Millbridge Pale, shifting glows that appeared and disappeared without warning. Some said the lights spelled out shapes or patterns, while others dismissed them as tricks of the eye or reflections from distant houses. Still, the stories drew a handful of brave souls to the woods, flashlights in hand, searching for any sign that the missing might be trying to send a message from wherever they had gone. Whether real or imagined, the lights fed the hope that Maplewood's 33 were not lost, only hidden, waiting for the right moment to return. By the 17th day, exhaustion had become a companion to every resident of Maplewood. Even so, a stubborn-willed persisted people refused to abandon the search, determined to uncover the truth even as the days without answers grew longer. In the light of early morning, the town felt changed, its edges blurred by sleeplessness and the sense of moving through a waking dream. The rumor of lights in Millbridge drew a small group of townsfolk and investigators into the woods before dawn, hoping to find proof They watched and waited in the cold shadows, but the ruins remained still, offering nothing more than the occasional call of an owl and the distant rustle of wind through leaves. Yet the feeling lingered that something had been there just out of sight, something that retreated as they approached in the command center. Investigators catalogued every reported sighting and every new theory. They began cross-referencing the postcards, ribbons, and the history of past disappearances in the region. Patterns started to emerge, though no one could agree on their meaning. Some believed the answer lay in the land itself, in the mysterious geography and the vanished towns that dotted old maps. Others pointed to a cycle, a force that visited Maplewood and its neighbors at regular intervals, taking people and leaving confusion behind. Each new theory brought fresh debate and more questions, but the sense that they were on the edge of discovery kept spirits alive. The shared meals at the community center took on even greater significance as the days dragged on. People found comfort in routine, in sitting together and sharing stories about the missing, recalling funny memories and moments of kindness. The town's youngest children, too young to fully understand, played games in the corner, pretending to search for lost friends with toy flashlights and whispered clues. The grown-ups watched them and smiled through their worry, drawing strength from the innocence and hope of youth. In these small acts of togetherness, Maplewood found its resilience. That night, as families gathered at their windows, hoping to spot the mysterious lights or catch a glimpse of the missing, a new phenomenon occurred. A thick mist rolled in from the woods, denser than before, creeping through the town's streets and yards. Some said it carried with it faint sounds, snatches of music, distant laughter, even voices calling out familiar names. For a few minutes, the whole town seemed suspended, every sense sharpened, every heart racing. And then, as quickly as it arrived, the mist drifted away, leaving Maplewood even more unsettled than before. The unanswered questions pressed closer, and the determination to solve the mystery only grew stronger. The 18th day in Maplewood began with an uneasy quiet, the kind that settles after a night of troubled sleep. People woke early, still thinking of the mist and the sounds it seemed to carry. Some compared notes with neighbors, trying to decide what was real and what was only imagination shaped by fear and longing. The stories varied. A child claimed to hear her father's voice. A teenager swore he saw the outline of someone waving from an empty street, and an elderly woman insisted she smelled her late husband's cologne in the fog. Investigators, determined not to be swayed by suggestion, recorded each account, aware that even the strangest stories might contain a kernel of truth. In the command center, the team's focus shifted toward the possibility of a repeating cycle tied to the land and the calendar. Experts analyzed old diaries, meteorological data, and property records, searching for overlaps between past disappearances and unusual environmental events. It was an exhausting process, but slowly a pattern began to form. Incidents seemed to cluster around the summer solstice, especially in years when fog or storms lingered. Clara Walton and her colleagues plotted each event on a timeline, wondering if they were getting closer to understanding why and places like Millbridge might be vulnerable to such strange losses. Meanwhile, the daily routines that kept the community strong began to fray under the weight of worry. Attendance at shared meals dwindled as some families grew too anxious to leave home after dark. Small businesses struggled, and several families quietly packed up and left town, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer. Those who remained grew closer, checking on each other more frequently and sharing supplies when needed. There was a sense that Maplewood was becoming both smaller and stronger, its circle closing around those who refused to give up hope. Late in the afternoon, another twist deepened the mystery. A group of searchers returned from Millbridge with an old, rusted key they'd found beneath a pile of stones near what might have been the settlement's main building. The key was heavy, ornate, and unlike anything from modern homes. On the shaft, faint letters spelled out a date, June 21st. As word spread, excitement and fear rippled through the town. June 21st was only days away. Was the key a warning, a clue, or an invitation? No one knew, but everyone agreed on one thing. They could not let the date pass without watching, waiting, and searching with more resolve than ever before. Maplewood awoke on the 19th day with a sense of anticipation that bordered on anxiety. The key had become the town's new obsession, discussed over breakfast tables and in hurried conversations at the market. People speculated endlessly. Some believed it might unlock a hidden door or a secret room in the ruins of Millbridge, while others thought it was meant for something far less literal. Investigators handled the artifact with care, cleaning it gently and photographing every detail. Clara Walton, together with the folklore experts, pored over maps, blueprints, and old property records, searching for any mention of a lock or location that matched the key's design. Every clue, no matter how faint, was examined for its possible connection to June 21st. The sense of community, shaken but resilient, showed itself in new ways. Small groups of volunteers patrolled the outskirts of town, keeping an eye on both the woods and the ruins. The church hosted special gatherings, where people prayed not just for the missing, but for clarity, unity, and strength in the days ahead. Even the skeptics showed up, admitting that Maplewood had entered territory where logic and reason were in short supply. At the community center, the shared meal turned into a planning session, with townsfolk organizing teams to watch the ruins, monitor the weather, and stay connected through walkie-talkies and radios on the night of the solstice. As June 21st approached, tensions heightened. Investigators received more reports of strange lights in the woods and odd sounds drifting across the fields at dusk. The paranormal investigators placed cameras and audio recorders throughout Millbridge and along the creek, hoping to capture something definitive. Town leaders coordinated with the police to keep outsiders away, fearing that curiosity seekers might interfere or make things worse. There was a sense that something significant was coming, a culmination of years of patterns, warnings, and mysteries. Even those who had never believed in curses or cycles found themselves watching the sky, listening for whispers and checking doors twice before bed. That evening, Clara and her team finally made a breakthrough. Tucked away in an old ledger from Millbridge's last days was a hand-drawn map with a single symbol, a key marked beside the foundation of the settlement's meeting hall. It was not much, but it was enough to focus everyone's efforts. Plans were made to gather at the site at dawn on June 21st, the date etched on the mysterious key. As the 19th day ended, Maplewood's fear and hope mingled in equal measure. The town braced for whatever the solstice might bring, determined to face it together and to hold on to the belief that some mysteries could still be solved if only enough hearts and minds stood together against the unknown. The 20th day in Maplewood was filled with nervous preparation as the solstice approached. All morning, the town buzzed with a quiet urgency. People packed bags with flashlights, cameras, first aid kits, and even thermoses of coffee. uncertain how long the night ahead would last or what it might bring. At the community center, leaders checked radios and reviewed the volunteer roster, assigning groups to specific areas around Millbridge and the ruins of the old meeting hall. Some, especially those with young children or frail relatives, opted to stay home and wait, but the sense of unity was unmistakable. No one in Maplewood was willing to face the coming night alone. Investigators and folklore experts pored over the hand-drawn map and the clues from Millbridge, searching for any last-minute insights that might guide their actions. The key was kept in a clear evidence bag, entrusted to Clara Walton, who found herself at the center of both planning and hope. She studied every detail, rehearsing the steps needed to reach the meeting hall's ruins by sunrise. Meanwhile, paranormal researchers tested their equipment, triple-checking batteries and night vision lenses, ready to document any anomaly that might occur. The collective sense was clear. Something was coming, and Maplewood needed to be ready. As evening fell, families gathered for one last meal together before dispersing to their posts. The air hummed with low conversation, nerves, and an odd sense of purpose. Some residents exchanged tokens of luck-worn coins, faded ribbons, simple notes of encouragement. Children were tucked into bed early, reassured by promises that the grown-ups would keep them safe and sound. Candles flickered in windows across town, their soft glow a signal that hope and courage had not been lost. Even as dusk deepened into night, the unity in Maplewood felt stronger than at any time since the disappearances just before midnight. Clara and her team led the first group into the woods, following the map to the foundation of Millbridge's old meeting hall. The ruins loomed eerily out of the darkness, their outlines softened by mist. Heartbeats quickened as the group fanned out, shining flashlights across weathered stones. At the precise spot marked on the old map, Clara knelt down, took a steadying breath, and placed the key in a rusted lock embedded in the ground. It turned with a creak, loud in the quiet night. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint vibration shivered through the stones, and the mist began to swirl in patterns no one could explain. All across Maplewood, people waited in silence, holding their breath as the longest night of the year revealed its first secret. As the first light of dawn edged over the trees, a hush had fallen over Maplewood. At the ruins of Millbridge's meeting hall, Clara Walton and her team watched in awe as the ground beneath the stones vibrated with a low, steady hum. The mist thickened and coiled, forming shapes that seemed almost human, their outlines wavering in the uncertain light. Radios crackled with updates as other groups around the town reported similar phenomena: cold gusts of wind, bursts of static electricity, and flashes of pale blue light. Some residents standing watch at home described hearing faint music or voices, too distant to make out, but strangely comforting. The night's tension mixed with a sense of wonder and fear. Clara's hands trembled as she withdrew the key from the lock, uncertain whether to expect disaster or relief. The vibration slowed, and the mist began to dissipate, revealing a shallow depression in the ground that had not been there before. Carefully, the searchers unearthed a metal box, aged but unbroken. Inside, they found a stack of letters, each one addressed to a family in Maplewood, written in a careful hand and dated decades apart. The contents stunned everyone. The letters described previous disappearances in chilling detailed dates, names, and even accounts of the strange fog and mysterious lights. Each note ended with the same sentence: "Watch the longest night and remember, some doors open only once. As the news spread through the town, people gathered at the community center to read the letters, piecing together a timeline of disappearances that stretched back more than a century. The evidence was undeniable. Maplewood and Millbridge had been linked by a recurring event, one that seemed to defy any rational explanation. Some believed the letters were a warning, others a guide, but all agreed that the messages contained patterns, hints for surviving the cycles, and, perhaps, clues for how to break them. That morning, as the sun fully rose and the mist melted away, a collective exhaustion settled over Maplewood, but beneath the wariness, there was a new resolve. The town had confronted something that existed beyond ordinary experience and survived. For the first time in weeks, hope felt tangible. People hugged, wept, and whispered promises to keep searching and remembering, to hold tight to each other in the face of uncertainty. The key, the letters, and the memories of the night were stored in the community center for safekeeping. Reminders of how close Maplewood had come to being lost, and how much was left to discover. In the days following the solstice, Maplewood felt both lighter and more burdened. The mist no longer crept through the streets, but the evidence from the metal box weighed on every conversation. Families passed the letters from hand to hand, reading aloud to those who could not bear to face the words alone. The truth was sobering. Disappearances had shadowed their town for generations, leaving pain and confusion behind each time. Old-timers who once dismissed the legends now confessed their own memories, stories told by grandparents, half-remembered warnings, and tales they'd once considered too fantastic to believe. The community's grief deepened, but so did its sense of unity. Investigators worked around the clock, entering the names and dates from the letters into national databases and checking for matches with other towns. The pattern was clear. Every 20 to 30 years, towns within a certain radius of Maplewood reported clusters of missing people, always under mysterious circumstances. Federal agents, now convinced the case extended beyond one isolated incident, coordinated with law enforcement in neighboring counties and states. Teams began to share files, compare notes, and question whether the key, the mist, and the timing of the solstice could be the connecting thread. Some experts argued for natural phenomena, earthquakes, sinkholes, mass hysteria, while others quietly admitted there might be no scientific answer at all at the same time. Hope stubbornly refused to die. Inspired by the contents of the letters, Clara Walton led a new initiative, documenting every detail of Maplewood's ordeal in a central archive at the community center. People brought photos, journals, audio recordings, and artifacts tied to the missing 33. Volunteers organized the materials, creating timelines and storyboards that filled the center's largest room. Children and teens interviewed older residents, capturing oral histories and memories. It was a process of healing and connection, a way for the town to reclaim its story and ensure that what had happened would never be forgotten. Yet, as night fell on the 22nd day, a question echoed through the town: had the cycle truly ended, or was this only a pause? No one had been returned, and the missing remained absent, their fates a mystery. Some saw the calm after the solstice as a sign of hope. Others braced for another wave of the unknown. The town's wounds remained open, but its spirit was unbroken. Maplewood had come together in the face of the unexplainable, holding on to each other, determined to learn, remember, and above all, never stop searching for the truth. The 23rd day dawned quietly, with sunlight glinting off the morning dew as if to cleanse Maplewood of its sorrow, if only for a moment. In the heart of town, the community centre became a hive of activity as people gathered to add new material to the growing archive. The task of recording every memory and rumour offered a sense of purpose, especially to those who had lost loved ones. Local teachers arranged for older students to help with interviews and digitizing documents. The process connected generations, as children listened to stories that blurred the line between history and legend. Some so strange, they seemed to belong to another world entirely at the same time. Clara Walton's initiative drew interest from beyond Maplewood. Researchers, journalists, and families from other towns, some with their own tales of strange vanishings, travelled to join the effort. They shared newspaper clippings, photographs, and testimonials, many eerily similar to the patterns in Maplewood's letters. The realization dawned that their town's tragedy was not unique, but part of a larger web of disappearances stretching across the region. The new information fueled both hope and dread. Perhaps, by joining forces, answers would emerge. Yet, for some, the stories only reinforced the sense that the missing were caught in a mystery far greater than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, life tried to resume its rhythms. Businesses reopened, church bells rang for Sunday services, and the park hosted its first community picnic since the disappearances. The mood was subdued, but laughter returned in small bursts, children chasing fireflies at dusk, neighbors greeting each other with hugs instead of wary glances. Still, at the picnic's edge, candles flickered beside photos of the 33, and conversations inevitably circled back to the unresolved questions. Each smile carried the weight of loss. Every ordinary moment was tinged with the hope that someday the missing would come home. That evening, as the town quieted and dusk crept in, a gentle breeze carried the scent of rain. Families lit candles in their windows, a tradition that had begun on the night that 33 vanished and now seemed destined to endure. Some prayed, some watched the woods, and others simply sat in silence, letting the memories of those lost fill the room. Maplewood was a town changed, its innocence gone, but its resilience stronger than ever. Even as darkness settled, a promise lingered. They would not forget, and they would not stop searching, no matter how long it took. By the 24th day, Maplewood had become a place of both pilgrimage and recovery. Outsiders arrived daily, relatives of the missing, researchers hoping to spot a clue, and even skeptics drawn by the story's enduring mystery. The community centre archive grew more organized, walls lined with maps, time charts, and faded photographs. Audio recordings played softly in the background, capturing voices from decades past, urgent warnings, memories of fog, stories of vanished neighbors. Children who once feared the woods now visited the centre to draw pictures of what they imagined had happened. Some depicting otherworldly doors, some simply showing hands reaching for the lost. Every piece of art was carefully saved, a small gesture of hope. The search for answers never fully stopped, but it took on a quieter, more methodical tone. Clara Walton and a team of volunteers set up an information-sharing network with other towns affected by similar disappearances. Calls and emails poured in, recounting strange lights, mysterious illnesses, and towns that seemed to slip out of memory after tragedy struck. Each story was catalogued and compared with the Maplewood timeline. A few investigators travelled to neighbouring counties, following up on recent rumours of odd weather and strange animal behaviour. The theories ranged from the scientific to the supernatural, but everyone agreed on one thing. Maplewood's story had forced a wider reckoning with mysteries long ignored within the town. Life crept back toward normal, but never quite reached it. People returned to their jobs and routines, children played in the park, and the bakery once again filled Main Street with the smell of fresh bread. Yet there was a collective gentleness in how neighbors treated each other, a kindness born from shared hardship. Strangers were welcomed with warmth and curiosity, and every community event, picnics, markets, church services, was dedicated, in part, to the memory of the missing 33. The shared meals at the community center continued, with stories and updates shared every night, keeping the missing ever present in conversation and in spirit. As evening fell, a soft rain began to fall, pattering gently on the rooftops and streets. People watched from their porches, candles glowing in windows, the rain washing away the dust of a long, strange summer. For the first time in weeks, a sense of calm settled over Maplewood. The pain of loss remained, but so did hope, steady and bright, undimmed by the passing days. In the quiet, the town found comfort in togetherness, knowing that as long as they remembered and searched, the missing would not be lost to time. They would endure just as Maplewood itself had endured, holding on to the promise that answers, however distant, might someday come. On the 25th day, the air in Maplewood felt fresher, carrying hints of autumn as summer began its slow retreat. The town, though scarred by its ordeal, pulsed with a new resilience. Each morning began with a moment of remembrance at the community center, where people gathered to light a candle and speak the names of the missing 33. The act had become as routine as brewing coffee or reading the morning paper, a ritual of hope and stubbornness, proof that no one intended to let the story fade. The growing archive now filled several rooms, and volunteers carefully filed every photo, map, and testimonial for future generations outside. Search efforts had become part of the landscape, woven into daily life. Hikers with orange vests and radios combed the woods around Millbridge and Maplewood, sometimes joined by visitors from out of town. Investigators had not abandoned the supernatural theories, nor the possibility of some undiscovered natural hazard. Some townspeople even claimed to spot the occasional shimmer in the woods, a ripple in the air, as if sunlight bent differently in certain places. These stories, half hopeful and half frightened, were recorded along with the more traditional evidence. As summer waned, the collective sense grew that whatever had happened here was not finished, that Maplewood remained a crossroads for mystery. Community events took on special meaning, bringing neighbors together in ways both old and new. The weekly farmers' market turned into a festival of shared recipes and stories. Musicians played in the park, dedicating songs to the missing and those who kept searching. At the bakery, loaves of bread were baked in batches of 33, each one sold with a slip of paper bearing the name of someone lost. These gestures, small but heartfelt, helped carry Maplewood through another day, another week. The pain was not erased, but it was softened by compassion and unity. That night, a meteor shower lit up the sky, drawing families out to watch from porches and backyards. Children made wishes, and parents exchanged quiet glances, each hoping for a sign or an answer in the streaks of light. Some believed the meteors were a good omen, a symbol of change or return. Others simply found comfort in the beauty above, a reminder that even in the darkest times, moments of wonder could still break through. Maplewood slept that night beneath a sky full of stars, unanswered, but not undone, stronger for all it had endured. As the 26th day dawned, Maplewood woke to a chill in the air and a sense of cautious optimism. The town's wounds had not healed, but each morning seemed a little brighter as people found strength in routine and in each other. Local teachers organized field trips to the community center archive, turning Maplewood's story into a living lesson on resilience, mystery, and hope. Children asked thoughtful questions about the missing 33, their curiosity both innocent and profound. Volunteers took time to answer, sharing memories and lessons from the past weeks, reminding the youngest residents that their voices mattered. 2. In the telling and the healing, investigators and experts continued their work, digging through the ever-growing database of disappearances, weather patterns, and strange phenomena reported across the region. Federal agents joined forces with local authorities, holding weekly strategy sessions in hopes that one overlooked detail might spark a breakthrough. Clara Walton traveled to a nearby town that had suffered a similar incident in the 1970s, hoping to compare records and interview survivors. The collaboration revealed striking similarities in the patterns of missing people, especially during solstice weeks and under unusual meteorological conditions. Clara returned to Maplewood with new resolve, convinced that their search might one day prevent another tragedy not just here, but anywhere. Meanwhile, ordinary life reasserted itself in gentle ways. Residents planted new flowers in the town square, and families gathered for Sunday picnics, determined to reclaim joy in small, everyday moments. Church services grew in attendance, and more than one sermon reminded listeners that faith could coexist with questions. Each gesture, each handshake, each shared meal, each walk through the woods wove a safety net for those who struggled most with grief and fear. The missing were never far from anyone's mind, but Maplewood learned to hold hope and sorrow together, refusing to let either one overwhelm the other. As dusk approached, a gentle wind stirred through the trees, and the first leaves of autumn fluttered down. People gathered in the park for a community concert, the music rising softly as the sun slipped below the horizon. Candles glowed on the grass, illuminating faces and casting warm light on the pages of the memory books where townsfolk continued to write stories, tributes, and dreams. As the final song ended, a hush fell over Maplewood. In that stillness, it was possible to believe that the missing 33 were close by, remembered, cherished, and waiting, perhaps, for the right moment to return. Maplewood settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal, though every heart knew life would never be the same. The 27th day began with brisk winds and bright sunshine, and for the first time in weeks, laughter could be heard echoing down Main Street. Still, no one let their guard down completely. Search parties continued, less urgent but no less dedicated, combing through every lead and double-checking areas that had already been searched. The townsfolk took turns supporting these efforts, dropping off sandwiches and thermoses of coffee, offering encouragement in small but meaningful ways. Even the children, once fearful of the woods, now explored in groups, determined to take back what had once belonged to them. Meanwhile, the archive at the community center had become a point of pride for Maplewood. Residents from across the region sent letters and messages, sharing stories of loss, survival, and hope. News outlets picked up the story again, not as a tale of fear, but as an example of unity and perseverance. Clara Walton and her team worked tirelessly to connect with other communities affected by similar mysteries, forming a network of support that stretched across counties. Each new piece of information was carefully logged, each memory cherished and preserved. Maplewood, once isolated in its grief, was now linked to a wider world, joined by a shared determination not to let these stories fade into silence. As weeks passed, the physical evidence of the disappearances grew cold, but something else began to shift. People spoke of small, unexplainable comforts, dreams where loved ones smiled, sudden wafts of familiar perfume, or a sense of presence during quiet moments. Some dismissed these as tricks of the mind, but others believed they were signs that the missing 33 had not been entirely lost. These moments were never discussed loudly, but were shared in hushed voices at the bakery, in the park, or at the edge of the woods. The mysterious, the scientific, and the spiritual began to blend in Maplewood, forming a new understanding of how to carry on while honoring the unanswered questions. That night, as darkness settled, the town gathered in the square for a candlelit vigil. Songs were sung, stories shared, and tears shed, but there was also laughter and a sense of peace. Maplewood was not healed, but it was healing. Under a canopy of stars, neighbors made a simple promise: to remember, to search, and to never stop hoping for the day when the story of the missing 33 might finally reach its end. The 28th day marked a turning point, as Maplewood embraced both remembrance and resilience. That morning, the bakery reopened at full hours for the first time since the disappearances, filling Main Street with the familiar aroma of fresh bread and cinnamon rolls. Customers lingered longer than usual, savoring both the pastries and the chance to reconnect. Conversation often drifted back to the missing 33, but the focus was on their lives, their favorite treats, the kindnesses they had shown, the ways their absence shaped every small celebration. Each memory was another thread binding the town together. At the community center, Clara Walton hosted a gathering for leaders from other affected towns. The room was filled with maps, timelines, and photographs, each one a piece of a much larger puzzle. Some guests arrived with their own stories of strange weather, unexplained vanishings, and the long shadows cast over communities like Maplewood. There were moments of sorrow, but also of inspiration, as people shared strategies for support, remembrance, and advocacy. Plans were made for a regional Remembrance Day, ensuring the missing from all towns would be honored, their stories kept alive, not just in Maplewood, but across the region. As the afternoon sun filtered through golden leaves, townsfolk took part in a symbolic act of healing. The children, guided by teachers and parents, planted a grove of maple saplings near the creek where the first footprints had been found. Each tree bore the name of one of the missing, written on a small plaque at its base. The act was both a tribute and a promise, roots sunk deep in the earth, branches reaching for the sky, a living memorial that would grow with each passing year. Tears flowed freely, but they were joined by laughter as children ran between the saplings, weaving hope into the very landscape. That night, as dusk settled, the town gathered again for music, stories, and reflection. Candles glowed along the new grove, their light flickering in the breeze. People spoke softly of dreams and moments of comfort, of how the missing seemed close on nights like this. The pain of loss remained, but it was softened by the strength of togetherness and the gentle hope that filled the air. As the stars emerged, Maplewood understood something profound. Though the mystery might never be solved, the community could still choose how to respond with kindness, with courage, and with a promise to never forget. The 29th day began with a gentle rain, the kind that nourished the saplings in the new memorial grove and washed the dust from Maplewood's sidewalks. The town, now deep into summer, had found a fragile but enduring balance between mourning and renewal. The archive at the community center grew daily, a living record of memories, clippings, and whispered hopes. Volunteers from neighboring towns dropped off boxes of photos and letters, each story adding new perspective to the growing chronicle of loss and survival. The sense that Maplewood's mystery was woven into a much larger tapestry grew stronger with every shared memory. Investigators remained busy, cataloguing the last of the physical evidence and digitizing everything for posterity. Theories about the disappearances still circulated, but the tone of discussion had shifted from desperation to determination. Clara Walton coordinated with regional historians, organizing a conference where experts would compare notes and brainstorm solutions. The gathering was set for the following week, with an open invitation for anyone affected by strange disappearances, no matter how far back their stories reached. The hope was that unity and transparency would prevent future tragedies, or at least help other towns feel less alone if the unthinkable ever happened again. Meanwhile, life in Maplewood continued its slow, careful recovery. Small joys grew brighter against the backdrop of uncertainty: birthday parties in the park, impromptu concerts on porches, neighbors delivering meals to each other just because, the farmer's market overflowed with late summer produce, and the aroma of fresh pies and herbs drifted through the square. Old wounds lingered, but kindness became the norm, a gentle ritual in a place still learning how to live with absence. Children, less frightened now, played tag in the park and told stories about the saplings growing taller each day. As evening fell, a rainbow appeared, arching over Maplewood's rooftops. People stepped outside to watch, some snapping photos, others simply soaking in the beauty. For a moment, it felt like a sign, a wordless message that hope could still grow even in the aftermath of darkness. That night, families lit candles for the missing, sharing quiet stories and promises that no one would ever be forgotten. In the soft glow of candlelight, Maplewood found comfort not in answers, but in the strength and love that endured, lighting the way forward, even as mysteries remained. On the 30th day since the disappearances, Maplewood awoke beneath a sky washed clean by rain, the air sharp and full of possibility. The saplings in the memorial grove sparkled with droplets, and townspeople paused as they passed to run fingers over the engraved names, whispering greetings to the missing. The simple act of remembrance was a balm away to touch what could not be seen, to keep hope alive as summer's warmth began to wane. The archive had become a gathering place for new friendships and shared purpose, its walls lined with photos of both the missing and the living, linked by a determination that no story would be forgotten. That morning, anticipation hummed in the air as Clara Walton prepared for the upcoming conference. She sorted through binders and files, making sure every letter, map, and photograph was ready to share. Volunteers arranged chairs and brewed coffee, setting up tables for visiting researchers and families. There was a sense that something important was about to begin, not just for Maplewood, but for every community touched by the strange pattern of vanishing. Invitations had gone out far and wide, and as cars and buses arrived, the community center filled with the hum of voices, introductions, and the steady shuffle of hopeful footsteps. As the day unfolded, the conference became a mosaic of stories. Survivors from other towns stood at the front of the room, describing events that mirrored Maplewood's own ordeal: mysterious fogs, sudden silences, and entire families lost without trace. Experts discussed geological anomalies, weather patterns, and the role of collective memory in shaping legend and truth. Clara led a session on building community archives and support networks, urging others to create spaces for sharing both evidence and emotion. The air was thick with both sadness and possibility, as if the act of coming together could itself be a step toward healing. That night, as the visitors mingled under the stars, music drifted from the park and candles flickered along the paths of the memorial grove. Strangers became friends, joined by a shared vow to keep searching for answers and supporting each other, no matter how many years might pass. The conference closed with a simple promise. Maplewood's story would be remembered, its lessons shared far and wide, and the missing 33 honored for generations to come. Though the mystery remained, hope was no longer a whisper but a song, carried on the summer breeze into the hearts of all who listened. As Maplewood entered its 31st day since the disappearances, the town moved forward with a sense of purpose and unity unlike any in living memory. The conference's impact lingered. Researchers stayed to compare notes. Local volunteers shared what they'd learned, and families from distant places exchanged contact information, vowing to keep their newfound network alive. Clara Walton became a symbol of hope, her calm leadership inspiring others to believe that, while the mystery might not be solved soon, they were stronger together than apart. With every handshake and farewell, the feeling grew that a new chapter was beginning, not just for Maplewood, but for every community that had suffered loss. Life's routines settled around this new foundation. Children returned to school, now with lessons built from their shared experience classes on history, folklore, and even the science of search and rescue. Older students helped organize the archives, digitizing photos and scanning old letters, making the story of the missing 33 accessible for future generations. At home, families baked, gardened, and cared for one another with greater tenderness. No celebration or gathering was complete without a toast to absent friends, and the ringing of church bells on Sunday mornings was followed by a quiet moment of remembrance in the square. Even the search efforts adapted. While daily patrols grew less frequent, a core group of dedicated volunteers kept the work alive, hiking the woods around Millbridge and keeping watch on the old paths. Technology lent a hand. Wildlife cameras and motion sensors dotted the ruins, capturing not only animals but the occasional glimpse of mysterious lights or unusual fog. The evidence was always inconclusive, but each discovery added another piece to the puzzle, another spark to the fire of hope that someday the missing might be found or, at the very least, truly understood. As dusk fell on this 31st day, Maplewood gathered one more time in the memorial grove. Laughter mingled with tears as stories were shared, and a sense of gentle peace wrapped the crowd. The pain of the past weeks was still present, but it was no longer sharp. It had been woven into the story of the town itself, shaping it in ways both sad and beautiful. As stars brightened overhead, neighbors joined hands, lighting candles for the missing, and for all those searching for answers. In the soft glow, Maplewood stood as one resilient, hopeful, and ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. 32 days had now passed since the morning Maplewood's world changed. In that time, the town had transformed from a place overwhelmed by fear to a community bound together by hope and remembrance. The saplings planted in the new grove had already grown stronger, their roots taking hold, just as the people had found their footing again. At sunrise, Clara Walton walked through the grove, pausing at each plaque to whisper a name. Others joined her in quiet reflection, finding comfort in the living memorial and in each other's company. These moments, small but profound, reminded everyone that healing was a process, one marked by patience kindness, and the willingness to remember. Within the community center, the archive continued to grow, fed by stories arriving from across the country. Packages and emails came daily, some with photographs of other vanished towns, others with voice recordings or handwritten notes recounting experiences eerily similar to Maplewood's. Volunteers spent hours organizing, cataloging, and sharing these materials, building a national record that connected countless communities in a web of empathy and support. The project became a beacon, offering guidance and solidarity to those newly touched by the same mystery, helping them find the strength to endure and search for their own answers in daily life. The rhythms of Maplewood remained forever altered, but not broken. Teachers led their students in projects about the history of their town, exploring not just the facts, but the lessons learned, the value of unity, the strength found in vulnerability, and the importance of cherishing each day. Farmers' markets and outdoor concerts returned in full swing, and laughter rang through the park again. But always, in quiet corners and in the hush of evening, conversations circled back to the missing 33. Their absence was now part of Maplewood's identity, a source of sorrow and a call to kindness, inspiring the town to take care of each other no matter what uncertainty might come. That evening, as a golden sunset bathed the town in soft light, families gathered on porches and in the square. Candles flickered in windows, music drifted from open doors, and for a few perfect moments, Maplewood felt whole, not because the mystery was solved, but because its people had chosen connection over fear. The story of the 33 was still unfinished, but the love and courage that filled the town promised that, whatever happened next, Maplewood would endure. Together, the 33rd day arrived quietly, as if the town itself was pausing to take a breath. The sun rose through a haze of morning mist, painting Maplewood in gold and soft grey. It was a day of reflection, of honoring not just those who were missing, but the journey that had brought the town through fear, sorrow, and confusion to a place of hope and unity. People marked the milestone in their own ways. Some gathered at the memorial grove, others visited the archive, and a few took long, solitary walks through the woods, remembering, searching, and finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of the land at the community center. Clara Walton stood before the archive, now spanning walls and tables, a testament to the strength and endurance of Maplewood. Journalists arrived to document the town's progress, not as a story of tragedy, but of resilience. Families came together to share meals, light candles, and speak the names of the missing aloud, each name echoing through the halls, refusing to be forgotten. Children performed songs and read poems, their voices clear and hopeful, weaving the memory of the 33 into the present moment. It was an act of gentle defiance, a declaration that Maplewood's love for its lost would always outweigh the darkness of not knowing. The investigators, too, paused to reflect. The archive was now part of a growing national network, and law enforcement teams from other regions called in, sharing new theories and discoveries. Clara met with families from neighboring towns, each seeking comfort and offering their own stories. Together, they planned the first annual Remembrance Day, not just for Maplewood, but for every place touched by the same unexplainable mystery. It was a promise that the story would continue, that lessons learned here would help others, and that the missing, wherever they were, would never be alone. As dusk settled over the town, the people of Maplewood gathered for one last vigil in the memorial grove. The air was cool and filled with the scent of earth and maple leaves. Candles glimmered among the saplings, and voices rose in quiet song. The pain of loss was still there, but so was the certainty that love, memory, and hope would endure. The 33rd day closed with a sense of peace and quiet strength, a chapter's end, and a beginning yet unwritten, in a town forever changed but never defeated.